I've been MIA for a little bit, out exploring the world with my family. Our first stop was Egypt, and I'm here to tell you all about it, the pros, the cons, what we did, and why we most likely will never return to Egypt. This was our first time flying with Saudi Airlines, and to our surprise, we had a front row seat to some beatboxing entertainment.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Just beatboxing.
Our first flight was 7 hours, and we caught a really nice sunset, and our travel buddy took advantage of the time and decided to catch some sleep before we landed in Egypt. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but right before we landed in Egypt, I noticed these building-like things poking out of the clouds, and I had to show a perspective from the sky. We were still pretty high up, and the mountains below us were really tall. These building-like things poking out of the clouds were surpassing all of the mountains, and if anybody knows what it is, please tell me, because I am still tripping out about what I saw. Landing in Egypt, we found out that our luggage didn't make it with us, so we stuck around at the airport for the first 5 hours and waited for our luggage to come in on the next flight. So this is not my normal setup, and I did not want to wait until I was ready to do a video to give you guys my story. So I'm going to start off with the airport in Egypt was boring. There was nothing to do, nothing to see, and there wasn't even any restaurants that you could really eat at. So we were there for 5 hours, and we got bombarded while we were there with services for taxis, limousines, tours, anything you can imagine. It was just right off the bat, you know, a lot of pressure. So after being there for 5 hours, completely bored out of our minds, we got our luggage, and we ended up making a deal with a driver to take us from the airport to our hotel and to be our personal driver and take us to the places that we wanted to see while we were in Egypt. So honestly, that was probably our first mistake. I don't normally go through travel agencies or tour guides anytime we go out of town. I do a lot of research on what it is that I want to see or what we want to see and what we want to do, and we kind of make our own itinerary, and we usually just hire a driver and we do our own stuff. So this guy agreed to be our personal driver, and I told him all the places that we wanted to see and all the places we wanted to go, and he gave us a pretty good deal, so we went ahead and we made the deal with him. So first and foremost, our hotel was about 30 minutes away from the airport, and the traffic is crazy. The city itself in Cairo is very poor. The buildings, most of the buildings are all sand colored, so there's not a lot of color to Egypt. And we actually stayed at a hostel and not a hotel this time, and we've never stayed at a hostel before. This was our first time. We wanted to try it out because it is a new experience, and we had some guidance from some friends we met here in Thailand that suggested that staying in hostels are a cheap way to stay somewhere, and you can meet a lot of people, and they're usually pretty clean. You can get your own room, and we wanted to give it a shot in Egypt. Why we decided Egypt, I'm not sure, but I did some research. I found a hostel that had a lot of good reviews, and we got our own room. The only difference between a hotel and the hostel is you have shared bathrooms, so there's several bathrooms, but everybody shares them, and shared kitchen, and of course most people don't have their own room like we did. They have a shared room. So we went ahead and we stayed at a hostel this time. The hostel had an awesome view. We actually stayed in Tahith Square, and it's very known to the people in Egypt because they hold protests there. It's where people meet and have government meetings and all kinds of stuff. So it's a pretty popular area amongst the Egyptians, and there is a lot going on in the area. It's pretty much the city center. There's shops, there's restaurants, there's all kinds of stuff there, but you are further away from the tourist area. So I guess the downside of not being in a tourist area I'll explain to you later, but the upside was actually getting to experience the culture, experience the way that people live there, what they eat, how they are day to day, and it was a really cool experience. I don't think that I would stay in a hostel in the future, not because I didn't like it, but with a kid it's a little different. It's a new day and I wanted to touch base on why I said that our first mistake was hiring a private driver. Normally that's what we do, and in Egypt we had read that there is a lot of harassment for tourism there, and what we read, we thought, oh, we could take care of ourselves, we don't have to worry about it, but it was very overwhelming. And I do highly recommend that if you go to Egypt, go through a tour agency or a tour guide to see the places that you want to see, because they do provide a little extra protection for you to help alleviate being harassed by the locals. And I will say that we learned that by getting a tour while we were there and seeing the difference between hiring somebody to take us and going through a tour agency. Checked out the old market, which is very popular in Cairo. They have a tourist section and they have a section that the locals used. We checked out both sides. The food is awesome. I suggest that you go if you ever go to Egypt, but I do recommend you using a tour guide or tour agency to take you there. We walked around the area that we stayed at, which is more the city center, and there was some things that made us feel uncomfortable, but I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So our private driver brought us to this tour agency when visiting the pyramids, and at first I was a little thrown off because I thought that the price he had given us included the tour of the pyramids. However, this is where we learned really quickly that it was very beneficial to have a tour agency and a tour guide when going through the pyramids, because this tour agency in particular really helped us feel safe. They helped us avoid being harassed by the locals, and they also gave us a lot of tips on how to save money and avoid being ripped off by the people that are selling stuff to you in the pyramid. This tour agency uses a horse and carriage to get you to the entrance of the pyramids. Other agencies might use a camel or a car. We were able to see the city of Giza on our way to the entrance of the pyramids, and originally I had actually rented a hotel to stay in Giza during our time in Egypt. After doing some research, I had found that it wasn't the safest of areas, it wasn't very clean, and it made me change my mind, which is why I looked into the hostel. Both areas will give you a different experience, because Giza is obviously more of a tourist area, which you might feel a little more comfortable wearing shorts or a tank top, whereas where we stayed at, it was not very comfortable wearing anything of that nature. So depending on the experience that you're looking for, I can't tell you not to stay in Giza, but both areas will give you a different experience. Our first stop was to meet a friend of our guide who had camels behind the pyramids. It was included in our package that we purchased through the tour agency, which also included pictures on our phones. So as he took us there, my first initial reaction to seeing the pyramids and the Sphinx is I couldn't believe that I was there and seeing it with my own eyes. We got so lucky during our trip in Egypt because we avoided a lot of crowds, and I don't know how we got so lucky, but our pictures and our footage all came out amazing, and we didn't really have to fight the crowds to see what we wanted to see. I wanted to show footage that the pyramids are surrounded by desert, but it is also surrounded by the city of Giza. It wasn't exactly what I had imagined it in my head, but by all means, it didn't take away from the experience at all. I had never rode a camel in my life, and getting Aiden to get on the camel was like pulling teeth. But nonetheless, the experience was amazing, and I'm so glad that we didn't have to fight the crowd for the footage that I wanted to show you guys some of my favorite shots from this day, and this wouldn't be the last time that we took a trip to the pyramids during our time in Egypt. We went inside a few of the smaller pyramids where we weren't allowed to take pictures or video, but the guide that was inside allowed it, and he even took some pictures of us as a family. The next stop was the Sphinx, and luckily there was no crowds. The last stop of the day was the Mosque of Muhammad Ali, and it was a really nice mosque. It was a little bit of a drive away from the pyramids, but when you get to the top of where the mosque is at, you can still see the pyramids from far away. Whenever we got here, we were still bombarded and harassed by some of the locals and for what they were selling, and we didn't have a guide for this one, but it wasn't too bad and it was a little more tolerable than it was at the pyramids. In most of my footage, you're going to see that I'm wearing pants or something that covers my shoulders for a majority of the time that we're in Egypt. I had a really bad experience in Cairo where we were staying. Muslims obviously believe in covering your shoulders and your knees, and as a tourist, I didn't really bring clothes that did that, so I ended up purchasing some clothes in Egypt to help me feel more comfortable. I got a lot of stares, a lot of snickers, and I actually felt really uncomfortable dressing just like I would normally dress at home. Normally I wouldn't care so much, but because we weren't staying in a tourist area and some of the spots that we visited weren't really full of tourists, I did feel very uncomfortable, and I caught myself going back to the room to change to feel a little more comfortable in the setting that we were in. The inside of the mosque was really nice. They didn't let you wear your shoes, so you had the option of walking in barefoot, or you could purchase something to cover your shoes to walk inside. Once you walk to the other side of the mosque, you will walk into a balcony where you'll be able to see all of the city of Cairo, I'm assuming a part of Giza, and you can also see the pyramids from afar. So this pretty much completes our second day in Egypt, and it doesn't explain every reason why we won't be coming back to Egypt, but keep in mind we did spend 7 days here. So I probably will be doing another video to show you everything else that we did and everything else that we saw, and give you more reasons as to why we won't be returning to Egypt. So stay tuned for part 2.